All right. Hello, guys. Hello. Can you hear me? Hello.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello,
Good
guys.
afternoon, ma'am.
Good
Hello,
afternoon,
ma'am.
students. Hello. So last time I explained about the cerebrum, and today we will continue talking about the nervous activities. Okay. So let's talk about the brain structure. So because last time I explained you about the spinal cord. Аланчик, ну ты выключи, пожалуйста. Okay, so functions of the cerebrum. As you know, cerebrum provides higher brain functions such as interpretation, sensory input, initiation, voluntary muscular movement. So together, cerebrum, cerebellum, and basal ganglia memory, integrating information for reasoning, and interpretation of sensory input happens with help of the two tracts, okay, through the ascending tract, which, yes, with help of the receptors, okay. So functional region of the cerebral cortex, guys, we divide into the motor, sensory, and association areas. Primary motor areas, as I said on practice classes, they are lie in the frontal lobes anterior to the central sulcus and its anterior wall. Uh, you can see here, okay? So here we have motor areas involved with the control of voluntary muscles, primary motor area here. So behind the sensory areas involved with cutaneous and other senses, right? So this one we call precentral sulcus. This is a precentral gyrus, postcentral gyrus. So frontal lobe is like coordinating center, which involve in concentration, planning, problem solve. So here we have a frontal eye field. So in temporal lobe here, we have an area which is auditory area, okay? So also here happens interpretation of sensory experiences, memory of visual and auditory patterns, cerebellum, which is also coordinate body balance, voluntary movements, and help to maintain like the body balance. So, and occipital lobe is for visual area. So it's like combining visual images, visual recognition of objects, and parietal lobe is for understanding speech using words. So that's why we have two areas which we call Broca area and Wernicke area. So here Broca area is motor speech area and Wernicke area sensory speech area. So if the lesion will be here, we call like Broca's aphasia or motor aphasia when patient understands the speech but cannot talk, and Wernicke area sensory speech area when patient is not understanding Wernicke's aphasia what the person is talking about. Okay, so problems in the comprehension of the language, and motor Broca area problems with speaking. This is the differences. Okay, so also you can see read here. Broca area anterior to the primary motor cortex coordinates muscular activity to make speech possible, and above the Broca area is the frontal eye field that controls the voluntary movement of eye and eyelids here. Oops, sorry. And sensory areas are located in several areas of the cerebrum and interpret sensory input, producing feelings or sensations. Sensory areas for sight lie within the occipital lobe. Sensory and motor fibers alike cross over in the spinal cord or brain stem. So centers in the right hemisphere are interpreting or controlling the left side of the body and vice versa. So also I explained that on practice classes, but if you want, I can explain these things again today. So here, guys, actually, we can say that yes, so for sensory was 2 tracts, motor 1 tract, right? No, actually, guys, there are a lot of tracts for the motor fibers, not only the lateral corticospinal tract, but also anterior corticospinal tract, vestibular, for example, tactospinal tract, cerebral spinal tactus tract, but and also others. But the main one is the lateral corticospinal tract. Therefore, sensory unit there was dorsal column tract and spinothalamic tract. Okay, so various association areas of the brain analyze and interpret sensory impulses and function in reasoning, judgment, emotions, verbalizing ideas, and storing memory. Association areas of the frontal lobe control the number of higher intellectual processes. A general interpretive area is found at the junction of the parietal, temporal, occipital lobes and plays a primary role in complex through processing. So both cerebral hemisphere function in receiving and analyzing sensory input and sending motor impulses to the opposite side of the body. But most people exhibit hemisphere dominance for the language-related activities, speech, writing, and reading. So as you can see here, the left hemisphere is dominant in 90% of the population. Also, some individuals have the right hemisphere as dominant, and others show equal dominance in both hemispheres. So non-dominant hemispheres specialize in nonverbal functions and controls emotion and intuitive thinking. What about the basal ganglia? Masses of gray matter located deep in cerebral hemispheres that relay motor impulses from the. Okay, guys, I think that we can skip all the slides and go to the, because I think that you already know that things, okay? And I think that we can quickly talk about the basal ganglia and about the cerebellum, because actually here on the slides the information is like uh, not so like yes. Okay, guys, I will show you another lecture quickly. So about the cerebellum and basal ganglia. So the first will be the cerebellum, okay? So the first will be the cerebellum. 1 minute. Cerebellum. After that, I will quickly show you the lecture about the basal ganglia, okay? Because you will not understand the things from that slide. There are just too like little information, okay? So guys, cerebellum, okay? We will talk how it works together with primary motor cortex. So and also tomorrow on the lecture I'll explain you about the primary motor, oh I'm sorry, pyramidal tract, okay? So this is a case scenario, we will skip. Okay, so function of the cerebellum. Control of posture and voluntary movements, influences the smooth contraction of voluntary muscles and carefully coordinate their actions. Together with the relaxation of their antagonist, each cerebellar hemisphere controls muscular movements on the same side of the body, and that the cerebellum has no direct pathway to the lower motor neurons, but exerts control via the cerebral cortex and brainstem. So what does it mean, guys? That means that, for example, the brain hemisphere, they control the opposite side of the body, contralateral side of the body, right? The pyramidal tract. But cerebellum, it controls the main, it controls, guys, the same parts of the body, but because the cerebellum has no direct pathway to the lower motor neurons, as you remember, the origin of the lower motor neurons was in the peripheral nervous system, right, guys? Because there was synapsing in the anterior horn. After that, they become the lower motor neurons in the spinal, like outside of the spinal cord, because everything that happens inside the spinal cord referred to the what to the upper motor neurons, okay, and it exerts its control with cerebral cortex and brainstem. This is mid-sagittal section through the cerebellum. Okay, so main functions: maintenance of posture and balance, maintenance of muscle tone, coordination of voluntary muscle activity. So guys, now we will talk about the basal ganglia. So let's take a look to this picture. Okay, this is diagram that shows the complementary of the cerebellum and basal ganglia in motor function. So as you remember, guys, um, we have an output in nervous system and output, right? Input, output. So this is always like this is a rule, right? That we receive information and then we will give a response. So as you can see here in the input periphery, unmodified information goes to the cerebral cortex, right? Information repository computation. So, and it also not happen only in the sensory input, which was behind the central sulcus, right? Kaisamata sensory cortex. So in like yes, it has a many we have a many receiving structures in the brain. Okay. So, and guys, as you can see, we have an output, right? But cerebral cortex is also associated with basal ganglia and cerebellum. So, guys, how it working? So as you remember, we said that we have a ascending and descending pathways, right? But if you will pay attention here in the basal ganglia and in the cerebellum, these rows are going to the both sides, input and output. So that means that in the basal ganglia structures, right, deep brain nuclei. Okay, guys, deep brain nuclei. And in the cerebellum, they have a what mixed pathways, right? They also receive information and they give information. So we cannot say that the cerebellum and basal ganglia they have only input or only output. They have both. So complex information happens here. Okay. So and they are working together. Okay, they are planning and fine-tuning of movements. So cerebellum regulates movements by comparing an intended performance with an actual performance. Okay, so cerebellum attempts to reduce errors in the execution of the movements. Okay, and basal ganglia guys function is to initiate the movement. Okay, and cerebral cortex is to what guys, to not only like cerebral cortex guys is allows to happen all these functions. Okay, so voluntary movements, cerebellum movements such as like body balance. Okay, and here basal ganglia execution of movement, oh sorry, initiation of movements. Okay, so guys, they both basal ganglia and cerebellum, these both two structures mediate their effects by influencing upper motor neurons. So as you remember, upper motor neurons are found in the cerebral cortex, right? We have upper motor neurons and the lower motor neurons. So, guys, cerebellum and basal ganglia, they have excitatory inputs. They use glutamate and inhibitory output that use gamma aminobutyric acid as neurotransmitters, okay? But basal ganglia are influenced by dopaminergic and cholinergic neurons, and they don't play any vital role in the cerebellum. They play a role only in the basal ganglia. And guys, cerebellum influences upper motor neuron mainly in the contralateral cerebral cortex and brainstem. So let's, how I can draw? Can I draw on the slide? No? Why I cannot draw on the slide? Okay, let's open Paint. 1 minute, okay, guys? Because unfortunately I cannot draw on the slides. I don't know why. Let me quickly picture to you. I will show you how it together works. Okay. I don't know why, but I cannot draw the slides on that slides, but I can draw here. Okay, so again, pyramidal, extrapyramidal, cerebellum. Okay, let's use this. Let's use this picture. Okay, so on this picture, sorry, okay, guys, on this picture, you can see what brain structures, right? Cortex, hemisphere, midbrain, pons, medulla, and finally the spinal cord. Okay, so as we said, guys, we have upper motor neurons and lower motor neurons, okay, that are controlling together with cerebellum and basal ganglia our voluntary movement. So this is a, guys, lateral, this is a corticospinal tract or pyramidal tract, okay, lateral corticospinal tract. It starts from the cortex and travels down directly and then makes a crossover or decussation to the opposite part, okay, to the contralateral part of the spinal cord, and then synapses here with the anterior corticospinal tract, okay, and after that it goes to the peripheral nerves. So that means that the basal ganglia and cerebellum, they don't have like direct they don't have, guys, direct pathways that would controls voluntary movement uh, of the spinal cord. Okay, so because of that, because of no any direct pathways, cerebellum together with basal ganglia, they are influencing these upper motor neurons. Okay, so actually, guys, we divide here not only but after the, let me show you quickly. So here we have like imaginary line, okay, which we divide to the upper motor neurons and lower motor neurons. So upper motor neurons included all structures that are in the central nervous system: brain, midbrain, pons, medulla, and spinal cord. Okay, lower motor neurons include the peripheral nerves. So if the lesion will be in the upper motor neurons, it would lead to the central paralysis, lower motor neurons, peripheral paralysis. Also, we will talk about that on the lectures. But here, guys, let's like draw the cerebellum. Okay, so for example, here behind we have a cerebellum. Okay, let's draw like that. Sorry, I'm like bad at drawing. Okay, so here imagine that we have a cerebellum. Okay, with two hemispheres somewhere behind uh, the brain. So guys, and as you remember, we said that the cerebellum influences upper motor neurons mainly in the contralateral cerebral cortex and brainstem. So that means that the brainstem, oh sorry, cerebellum control influences the cortex like that, okay? So cerebellum For example, left hemisphere of the cerebellum influences the right hemisphere of the cortex. And the same thing is happening here, that the right hemisphere of the cerebellum influences the left part of the cortex, okay? But also we said, guys, that here that the cerebellum, guys, what? That the cerebellum also has a connection with the pyramidal tract, right? With the corticospinal tract. But it's like give their fibers by the ipsilateral side, okay? So influences the brain structures by the contralateral side and controlling the body movement by the ipsilateral. Here contralateral, here the ipsilateral, okay? And what about the basal ganglia? But basal ganglia influence upper motor neurons in the ipsilateral side. For example, guys, here we have the basal ganglia, okay? Somewhere deep structures, and basal ganglia influence upper motor neurons by the ipsilateral side. Yes, guys, it can be a little bit difficult, but it's important to put diagnosis to find out where is the lesion, okay? Where is the damage? Where is the problem is, okay? So let's continue. Okay, yes, here unfortunately I cannot draw. I don't know why, but maybe because this is not a PPT, because this is a PDF. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. This is the anatomy of cerebellum. We can skip, right? Divisions, anterior lobe, middle lobe, flocculonodular lobe. So we can skip structure. I think that you already know structure. Superior view, A, B, inferior view, pyramid, tube, what else? Middle lobe, right? Posterior lobe, anterior lobe. And also here we have a horizontal fissure, and this is the vermis. Okay. So guys, this is a flattened view of cerebellar cortex showing the main cerebellar lobes. Okay, so we divide them to the anterior lobe, middle lobe, flocculonodular lobe, and the vermis right here. So as you can see, guys, cerebellum is divided by 3 lobes. So also we have a layers of the cerebellar cortex, external layer, middle layer, and the internal layer. So guys, they're also important, okay? Cerebellar, molecular, Purkinje cell layer, and granular layer. So important one here, this is the Purkinje cell layer, okay? So this is the histology of that layers. You can see the Purkinje layers. So Purkinje layers, guys, these basket, stellate neurons, and Golgi neurons, they all have inhibitory effect, synaptic action, but stellate, granule interneuron, that has excitatory synaptic action, okay? So this is the functional areas, guys, and this is the topographic arrangement of skeletal muscles controlled by part of the cerebellum. So as you can see, guys, it's different from the homunculus that you saw on the Z structures. Let me show you. So this is, guys, a homunculus, okay? This is homunculus. So this is like representation of the body map encoded in primary motor cortex. And as you can see, here's like small areas for the legs and a big one only for the hand. So why? Because hand requires more cortical space because of the fine movements that we can do with the hand. Okay, so you can see and require more cortical space, while body parts relatively simpler movement like the hip or leg requires less cortical space because this homunculus, right, guys, the primary motor cortex, controlled our voluntary movement. So also you can ask the question, why, ma'am, here? This is the homunculus for the cerebellum. You can ask the question, right? Why homunculus for the brain, like primary motor cortex, was different, but here, topographic arrangement of skeletal muscles that control part of the cerebellum are equal to each other. So because cerebellum, guys, like actually do not control uh, voluntary movements at all, okay? It regulates that movements. So because, for example, if the lesion will be in the brain hemispheres, but the cerebellum will stay intact, guys, like person would be totally paralyzed, right? For example, guys, cerebellum working, brain structure is not working. But because the brain controls voluntary movement, but cerebellum do not, okay, guys, movements, what? There will be no any movements, right? Because cerebellum, guys, regulates, okay, like helps to comparing intended performance with an actual performance, okay, guys? So because of that, here you can see that the cerebellum has the same structures to what? Guys, same structures that control parts of the body, okay? So that's why it's equal. For example, you can see here that the both arms and legs are equal to each other here on this picture, okay? So because cerebellum do not control the fine movements, only body balance, posture, okay? So this is the somatosensory projections, also equal to each other by the size, not like in the primary motor cortex homunculus. Also, guys, we have a cerebellar nuclei, dentate nucleus, it's like back, like, and I don't know, like line. Vestibular nucleus, the bigger nucleus, globus nucleus, four, two pairs. Emboliform nucleus, one pair. Here's the pons, cerebellar hemispheres, okay? This is the cross section of the cerebellum, okay? So you can see here, but again, the Purkinje cells, okay? Mm. And finally, we reach the nerve fibers, okay, guys? So because in as you remember, we have a efferent and efferent, right? Guys, we have a efferent and efferent body, like efferent and efferent pathways. So here in the cerebellum, we have both of them, okay? And also we have an intrinsic, efferent and efferent ways, ways, tracts. You can use that word, okay? Cortex, cerebellar, mossy fibers, okay? So what about the mossy fibers? So mossy fibers to the cerebellum arise from nuclei, which are influenced by axons of neurons in the cerebral cortex. The mossy fibers to the vestibular cerebellum arise from the vestibular nerve and the vestibular nuclei. Okay, so also we have a peduncle, superior cerebellar peduncle, middle cerebellar peduncle, and inferior cerebellar peduncle. Mm, uh, Now let's talk about the tracts, okay, guys? You can see a lot of tracts here. If you want, you can learn them all, but the main important one here will be cortica ponta cerebellar, cerebro oliva cerebellar, and cerebro reticula cerebellar. So this is the efferent fibers, okay? But actually, guys, these names of these fibers of these tracts are really like simple because they carry the name that this pathway is started from which part the way starts cortical. So that means that this way it starts from the cortex and go to the pons and end in the cerebellum. Okay, cerebra oliva cerebellum pathway also the same. Okay, starts in the cerebrum, goes to the olives and then ends in the cerebellum. Cerebra retina like that. Okay, guys. So this is the efferent systems. Also, you can learn them on your practice classes. Okay, so this is the efferent fibers from the cerebral cortex. The cerebral peduncles shown is avoid dotted lines. Okay, this is guys peduncles. This is avoid structures. So you can see that the efferent nerve fibers. Okay, we have so they are started, guys, from the greater part of the white matter and proceed to the cerebellar cortex, right? Because this is the efferents. And guys, they enter the cerebellum mainly through the inferior and middle cerebellar peduncle. So we have a three type important parts, right? Corticopontocerebellar pathway. This one is the corticopontocerebellar pathway. This is the efferent one. So it arises from nerve cells in the frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital lobes of the cerebral cortex and descend through the corona radiata and internal capsule and terminate on the pontine nuclei here. Okay, cortica, cortica olivaris cerebellar pathway. Okay, so guys, cortica and cerebro, this is the main things. Okay, so we can say cortica olivaris cerebellar pathway, or we can say cortica oliveri. Okay, so cortica and cerebra, this is the same thing. Okay, so always remember that the pathway will carry the name. The first name will be where is this pathway it starts. Okay, so for example, here in the pyramidal system, we have a corticospinal tract, which means starts at the cortex and ends in the spinal cord. Okay, guys. So this is the names. So they are not so difficult that it seems. Okay. Cerebra oliva cerebellar pathway or cortical olivary cerebellar pathway arise from nerve cells again in the frontal, parietal, temporal, occipital lobes of the cerebral cortex, and after that it descends to the corona radiata. Okay, so here, guys, we have a corona radiata, and also here, as you remember, which structures, guys, do we have here? Huh? Hello, guys. Are you listening? So there was a structure like boomerang shape. Do you remember? Hello, guys.
Yes,
What
ma'am.
what was that structure? Near the corona radiata I'm showing right now here. So this is the thalamus, right? What is was here? Guys, internal capsule, right? Do you remember? Because a lot of pathways are going through the internal capsule, right? Guys, I explained you about the internal capsule on last lecture. Please revise, okay? Internal capsule, anatomy of cerebellum, anatomy of basal ganglia, all anatomy of nervous system. And guys, and here it's terminate this tract bilaterally, like two parts, right? Bilaterally on the inferior olivary nuclei. You can see here inferior olivary nuclei. This is um, corticoreticular cerebellar pathway. This is the middle one. Also, guys, it arises from nerve cells from many areas of cerebral cortex, right? Because as you remember, cerebellum has inputs and outputs from the cerebral cortex. So we can say that these all pathways are inputs to the cerebellum, okay? And this, guys, corticoreticular cerebellar pathway, descending pathway, and it descends to terminate in the reticular formation on the same side and on the opposite side in the pons and medulla, okay? And cells in the reticular formation give rise to the reticulous cerebellar fibers that enter the cerebellar hemispheres on the same side through the inferior and middle cerebellum peduncles, okay? So this is a cerebellar efferents, okay? You can see here, and also we have a fibers, okay? Anterior spinal, posterior cuneo-cerebellar efferent fibers, and guys, efferent fibers, okay? Whoa, was a picture, efferent fibers. Let me show you again that picture, guys. Also, we have, guys, a cerebellar efferent fiber. So this was the what? Cerebellar efferent fibers, right? That are starting from the cortex. But also, guys, we have a cerebellar efferent fibers, okay? So which spinal cord sends information, right? They also will be what? Spinal cord sends information to the cerebellum from some other sensory receptors by three ways: anterior spinocerebellar tract, posterior spinocerebellar tract, and cuneo-cerebellar tract. So you can see here cerebellar efferent fibers from the spinal cord and internal ear, okay? So you can see here cerebellar peduncles are shown as avoid dot lines. This is inferior cerebellar peduncle, middle cerebellar peduncle, and superior cerebellar peduncle. So anterior spinocerebellar tract, okay? So guys, it starts from the spinal cord, okay, and it goes to the uh, lateral columns and giving rise directly up, and after that it synapses in the superior cerebellar peduncle and goes to the bilateral part, not to the same part of the cerebellum but also to the opposite part, okay? Posterior spinocerebellar tract, okay? Spinocerebellar, which means start in the cerebellum and then goes from the spinal cord and then goes to the cerebellum. Nucleus, and here, guys, we have a vestibular nerve, right? Which brings information to the cerebellum from the, what, guys? From the middle ear structures, okay? So this is a way of the pathway. You can see, also you can read them at home, okay? Um, you can see anterior spinocerebellar, so start in spinal tract and the cerebellum, conveys information from muscles and joints, okay? Posterior spinocerebellar tract conveys information from muscles and joints. Also, cuneo-cerebellar tract conveys information also from muscles, joints of the upper limb, and vestibular nerve conveys information of head position and the movements. So with help of the mossy fibers, okay? Mossy fibers. And you can see here that the three tracks that I explained you before, corticopontocerebellar, cerebral cerebellar, and cerebral reticulocerebellar, these three tracts are conveys control from cerebral cortex, okay? So as you can see, guys, this is only the afferent pathways, but also we have an efferent pathway. So as you can see, an intrinsic pathway. So as you can see, only in one cerebellum, there are a lot of pathways, okay? Finally, efferent fibers. So as you can see, guys, why Purkinje fibers, why Purkinje cells are very important? Because entire output of the cerebellar cortex is through the axons, okay, of the Purkinje cells. And most axons of the Purkinje cells end by synapsing on the neurons of the deep cerebellar nuclei, okay, guys? So they are synapsing not only in the cerebrum but also in the deep cerebellar nuclei. And what here? Outflow, Purkinje axons. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So guys, you can see here the names of efferent fibers: globus emboliform rubral pathway, dentathalamic pathway, fastigial vestibular pathway, and fastigial reticular pathway. So as you can see, these names of efferent pathways, they are formed by the name of the what? What is this, guys? Fastigial. What is this? Where did you see these names? Globus, dentathalamic, fastigial. There was a special cerebellar nuclei, right? Guys, yes. Are you sleeping? Okay, so you can see here cerebrocerebellar circuitry illustrating how Purkinje cells in the paravermal and lateral hemisphere are linked to upper motor neurons. And also, as you remember, guys, we said that the cerebellum is like controls the body balance and attached to the muscles only with help of the hmm? Guys, only with the what? With the cortica. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. 1 minute. 1 minute. Sorry. I'm sorry. 1 minute. Okay, guys, sorry, excuse me. 1 minute, okay? So, as you can see, guys, I told you why Purkinje cells are very important because they are linked to upper motor neurons, okay? So, as you can see, we have here corticospinal tract or pyramidal tract, right? And pyramidal tract starts in the upper motor neurons, right? After that, it goes to the internal capsule, okay, through these structures. After it decussate and goes to the through the cerebellum and no, not through the cerebellum, but also through the structures, okay? And the Purkinje fibers and rubrospinal tract here, guys. It also synapses in the paravermal hemisphere in the cerebellum, okay? Through the interpositous nuclei and through the dentate nuclei, okay? So here you can see that the Purkinje cell axons are playing role in the linking to upper motor neurons. So here you can see the name of the tracts, okay? Here you can see the name of the tract, cerebellum efferent fibers. So cerebellar peduncles are shown as avoid dot lines again. Here you can see. So the first one is the globus embryoniform rubral pathway, right? Globus embryoniform rubral pathway. So you can see here the name of the pathways. So dentathalamic pathway, globus embryoniform rubral pathway, fastigial vestibular pathway, fastigial reticular pathway. Let's talk about the dentathalamic pathway. So dentathalamic pathway, guys, influences ipsilateral motor activity, okay? So all these pathways, guys, they are, because they are afferent fibers, they are both mm, yes, influencing uh, the upper motor neurons and the neurons in the spinal cord, okay? And so as you can see here, the dentathalamic pathway, okay, guys, influences ipsilateral motor activity here, okay, like that. Its origin in the dentathalamic or in the dentate nuclei, okay, in the dentate nuclei. What else here? And guys, it goes to control this dentathalamic pathway, goes to control lateral ventrolateral nucleus of the thalamus, okay? Then to contralateral motor cerebral cortex. This is here. This fund is here. Corticospinal tract crosses midline and controls ipsilateral motor neurons in the spinal cord. Corticospinal tract crosses midline and controls actually contralateral neurons, right? Okay. Next one is globus embryoniform rubral pathway, guys. Um, so it influences ipsilateral motor activity, also like the dentathalamic pathway. And globus embryoniform rubral pathway, this is pathway, it starts, it's like has the origin in the globus and embryoniform nuclei, and it goes to the contralateral red nucleus, and then with help of the crossed rubrospinal tract to ipsilomotor neurons in the spinal cord. As you can see, it starts in the hemispheres, right, in the nuclei, then goes to the contralateral side through the red nucleus, and then crossing again, okay, guys, and goes to the ipsilateral motor neuron in the spinal cord. What about the fastigial vestibular pathway? Fastigial vestibular pathway influences ipsilateral extensor muscle tone. So as you remember, we have a muscle tone, and muscle tone is both has from the flexors and extensors, right? We can divide all groups of striated muscles to the flexors, extensors, but fastigial vestibular pathway influences ipsilateral extensor muscle tone. And according to this name, it starts at the fastigial nucleus, okay? And as you can see, it goes mainly to the ipsilateral and to contralateral lateral vestibular nuclei, vestibular spinal tract to ipsilateral motor neurons in the spinal cord. Can you see, guys? Okay, vestibular spinal. You can see here. Let me make it bigger. Okay, fastigial vestibular pathway. What? Found here, okay? And then goes to the spinal cord by the ipsilateral part. and reticular pathway, guys, influences again ipsilateral muscle tone, but all muscle, like not both from the for the extensor and flexors, okay. And according the name, it also has the origin like previous pathway in the fastigial nucleus, okay. And this vestibular reticular pathway, guys, goes to the neurons of the reticular formation. Here we have a reticular formation, and reticulospinal tract goes to ipsilateral motor neurons to the spinal cord. Okay, guys. So that means that after all, when all these tracts will synapses with each other in the spinal cord, they will reach the muscles only with the lateral corticospinal tract. Okay, you can see corticospinal tract. Please don't forget the corticospinal tract. This is the tract, the only one tract which carries the motor neurons to the muscles, to the periphery. Okay, guys, is it clear? I think, guys, that if you will understand how it works together, no need to memorize all the structs, okay? I think that it will be a little bit difficult to memorize all the structs for you, but if you will remember corticospinal tract, it will be very good, okay, if you will understand. Also, you can, guys, in YouTube, there was a video, LMN and UMN lesions, okay? I also can send you link and you can watch that video, very helpful video. Okay, this is also about the vestibular nerve. You can see feedback, right? Feedback, inputs, outputs. So as you can see, cerebellum serves as a comparator. The same thing. This is the main connections of the cerebellum that we told on this lecture. Everything is about that, okay? So guys, clinical correlation signs and symptoms. What will happen if the lesion will be in the cerebellum? Hypotonia, postural change and alteration of gait, ataxia, dysdiadochokinesia, disturbance of reflex, disturbance of ocular movement, and disorders of speech. So about this, we will talk on the practice classes, okay? Also, you can talk about this on your neurology classes. This is a syndromes, and the case. Okay, so also the cases you will talk about the cases you will solve on your um, neurology practice classes. Okay, if it was clear, um, let's go to the basal ganglia. Uh-huh. Because I told you that the basal ganglia works together with the what? With the cerebellum, right? I hope that you are not sleeping, guys. Mhm. Now let's talk about the extrapyramidal system. So extrapyramidal system, guys, this is a system which includes different structures from deep nuclei, such as caudare nucleus, putamen, globus pallidus, subthalamic nucleus, and substantia nigra, okay? So this is a brain structure you can see here. One minute. Okay. Okay. So guys, location of basal ganglia components in idealized brain section on the picture on the right, okay? Uh, Cell bridges between the caudate and putamen give a striated appearance, okay? So guys, basal ganglia comprises a distributed set of brain, right? Structures in the telencephalon, diencephalon, and mesencephalon. The four brain structures include the caudate nucleus, again, putamen nucleus, accumbens. So, guys, uh, to understand easier all the structures, okay, we divide like not neurologists are divided these all structures into two groups, okay. So the first group is the putamen and the second is the striatum, okay. So striatum, so putamen, you can see here, includes so guys, globus caudate nucleus, putamen nucleus accumbens, and the globus pallidus, the structures are named the corpus striatum, okay? And subthalamic nucleus and substantia nigra, these structures are together we can call pallidum, okay? Pallidum striatum. So this subthalamic nucleus and substantia nigra, pallidum. Caurarea nucleus, putamen nucleus accumbens, and globus pallidus striatum. So it will be easier to you to understand how they work together. Okay. So this is the text. Let's skip. Okay. So also, guys, like in the cerebellum, we have basal ganglia efferents, and we have a basal ganglia efferents, okay? Basal ganglia efferents and basal ganglia efferents. So let's go to the slide. Okay, so let's talk about the basal ganglia efferents. Um, so guys, here as you can see striatum, caudare, and plus putamen. Okay, together we call the structure striatum, but actually they must be like that. Actually, there's two parts. Okay, but let's erase this one. Okay, so striatum, guys, here you can see that striatum is main recipient of efferents to the basal ganglia, okay? So as you can see here, we have two ways from cerebral cortex and from the central median nucleus that are going to the putamen and caudate nucleus, okay, to the striatum. So guys, these efferents, they have excitatory effect, okay? And projections, guys, from these different cortical areas are segregated, okay? So for example, parietal and occipital lobes project to the caudate body. For example, frontal lobe projects predominantly to the caudate head, and temporal lobe projects to the caudate tail, okay? And and the primary motor cortex and mm, the primary motor cortex and the primary somatosensory cortex projects mainly to the putamen, whereas the premotor cortex and supplementary motor areas projects to the caudate head, okay? So also, guys, here we have a motor regions of the basal ganglia, and also there is the motor homunculus, and it's similar to the homunculus which you saw in the primary motor cortex. Okay. Mm, okay. And guys, basal ganglia efferents, okay? Basal ganglia efferents. So basal ganglia efferents. Here, guys, you can see that basal ganglia efferents start in the substantia nigra pars reticulata because we have a pars substantia nigra pars reticulata, pars compacta, right? Two parts, and it goes to the superior colliculus, and this superior colliculus, after that, it goes to the eye, right, guys? It goes to the uh, eye moving cranial nerves, okay? Yes. Okay, so here, guys, and the second one, basal ganglia efferent, globus pallidus, it starts from the globus pallidus internal segment, okay, and it goes to the ventral anterior nucleus. So, guys, now you know that we have basal ganglia efferent and basal ganglia efferent, okay? So what else here? You can see, guys, that the globus pallidus internal segment, right, and external segment. But the globus pallidus internal segment and substantia nigra pars reticulata, this part reticulata and this part, guys, this is a major output structures, okay? And both of these structures, guys, they makes GABAergic, gamma aminobutyric acid ergic inhibitory connections on their targets, okay? And guys, globus pallidus internal segment projects to a number of thalamic structures. This is the thalamic structures by way of two fiber tract ansa lenticularis and lenticularis fasciculus, okay, two parts. And yes, and also, guys, we have a loop here that processes the sensory motor projections, okay, um, to the ventral anterior and ventral lateral nuclei. So here you cannot see here the tract ansa lenticularis and lenticularis fasciculus, but here you can see the ventral anterior nuclei and ventral lateral nuclei. Okay. After that, guys, this information projects to the dorsomedial nucleus, intralaminar nucleus, and the part of the ventral anterior nucleus. Okay, and substantia nigra projects to the superior colliculus, as I told you before, which involved in the eye movement. So that's why, because substantia nigra involved in the eye movement, the lesion to the substantia nigra in the Parkinson syndrome, we will talk again. We will talk about them. Will mm, will like play a role in the movement of eye, okay, because of movements of the eye will be like decreasing, okay, it will be very, very slow. So because of that, because of the superior colliculus, okay, and also ventral anterior and ventral lateral thalamic nuclei, guys, they also involved in the eye movement, okay, but not like the superior collicus, okay. And here you can see that we have two pathways. Бабуль, дверь закрой, дует. А? Нет, я не могу, я работаю. Okay, guys, sorry. So also we have a direct and indirect pathways, okay? So we have here, you can see Solid lines represent direct pathway and dashed lines represent indirect pathways, okay? So direct pathway, indirect pathway, okay? So this is the indirect pathway and this one is a direct pathway. Okay, guys, so we have two distinct pathways, okay, that process signals through the basal ganglia. Direct pathway, you can see here, indirect and direct pathway, okay? So guys, these two pathways, they have opposite net effects on thalamic target structures, okay? So here, thalamic targets, here we have a thalamic target structures, and the excitation of the direct pathway, like excitable effect, right? So excitation of the direct pathway has net effect of exciting thalamic neuron. Okay, they will be excitable. They will be excited. So which in turn make excitatory connections on the cortical neurons, right? Because as you can see, thalamic neurons, they end their way in the cerebral cortex, okay? So it's like by circle, it goes information and then it goes here, okay? So, and excitation of indirect pathway, okay? If we will excite indirect pathway, it will be net effect of inhibiting thalamic neurons, okay? Inhibiting thalamic neurons. So as you can see, guys, green lines represent excitatory connections and red lines represent inhibitory connections. So because of that, as you can see on this picture, all these lines, red and green lines, they are what? They are mixed. Okay. So normal functioning of the basal ganglia apparently involves a proper balance between the activity of these two pathways, okay? So guys, we have a hypothesis, okay, that the direct pathway this direct pathway selectively facilitates certain motor or cognitive programs in the cerebral cortex that are adaptive for the present task, and indirect pathway simultaneously inhibit the execution of comparing motor programs, okay? And upset of the balance between the direct and indirect pathway results in the motor dysfunction that characterize the extrapyramidal syndrome. So let me show you the, okay, I will quickly show you the one diagram, okay? 1 minute, I will find. 1 minute, please. Mm-hmm. 1 minute, okay, guys. Basal ganglia motor. Can you see, guys? Pictures.
Yes, ma'am.
So actually, yes, they should work, okay? So as you can see here, again, this is the same pictures. I took this picture from the side. Okay, so now you can see direct pathway, right? This is a direct pathway. This is the indirect pathway. And also we have a nigrostriatal pathway, okay, guys? Direct pathway, indirect pathway, and nigrostriatal pathway. So as you can see, nigrostriatal pathway, it mixed pathway. This is a mixed pathway, right? It was drawn with the red and with the green lines. That means that it it has both the inhibitory and excitatory actions to the striatum, caudet and putamen. Okay, so indirect pathway, direct pathway, and nigrostriatal pathway. These all pathways, guys, they are mixed. Okay, so you can see, you can skip the slides. This. Okay, so guys, and as we told before, the lesions to the pathways will lead to the extrapyramidal disorders, okay? So we can say a number of neurological disorders result from damage to the basal ganglia. So we have, guys, two types of disorders, which we call so we divide extrapyramidal disorders, okay, to the two types. So it was like so we can divide into the Parkinson disease and Huntington disease. But actually, guys, in the whereas you can see the Huntington disease, there are also a lot of disorders, okay, which also included an extrapyramidal system. Also, we will talk about them on the practice classes. So now let's take a look. So as you can see in the substantia nigra, cells die in the Parkinson disease. You can see this is the nigrostriatal pathway, and they are died in the Parkinson disease. So as you remember, substantia nigra release dopamine, right? Dopamine. So because there will be no dopamine, substantia nigra will lose their both inhibitory and excitatory nerve effects that are influencing and excite striatum. So that's why in the Parkinson's disease, it will lead to the involuntary, uncontrollable shaking of the limbs, head, okay, legs, arms, and also all other clinical features such as bradykinesia, slowness, problem with the initiation of the movements, because you remember that the function of basal ganglia was also initiation of the movement. And in the Huntington disease, guys, as you can see in the Huntington disease striatum indirect pathway cells die, and if you will pay attention, they are drawn with the red lines, okay, so that means there will be loss of the, what? Loss of the inhibitory effect. So because of the loss of inhibitory effect, Huntington disease will lead also to the, what? To the uncontrollable choreatic movements. Okay, so chorea, guys, is not only the disorder, but the chorea is also the clinical sign. Okay, chorea is also like movements. So the difference is that in the Parkinson disease there will be slowness, okay, bradykinesia, like slow movements. Patient will talk quietly, slow movements of arm will be slow, problem with initiation of the movements, okay, so person becomes like very slow. And here, guys, because in the Parkinson disease we have both the inhibitory and excitatory, okay, pathways, but in the Huntington disease they're only the, what? Only the inhibitory pathway cells are dying. So that's why, guys, here in the Huntington disease, there will be no slowness, okay? There will be only the involuntary shaking, which we call choreatic movements, because Huntington chorea, okay? Chorea is uncontrollable violent like movements, okay? And the difference is, guys, that in the Parkinson disease, all these shakings, okay, this tremor, we call shaking, we call tremor, okay, tremor. So this tremor, guys, will appear only when the person is resting, okay? So that's why we call this a resting tremor. But in the Huntington disease, the chorea will be when the person is trying to move, okay? And this all because of these pathways, okay, guys? Because these pathways, they have a different functions, okay? Inhibiting or excitable or mixed of them, okay? So also you can see here. Okay, if you want, you can read, we can also read this one. So Parkinson disease characterized by slowness or absence of movement, bradykinesia, akinesia, rigidity. Rigidity, guys, this is the stiffness of the muscles and the resting tremor, especially in the hands and fingers. Patients have difficulty initiating movements and once initiating the movements are abnormally slow. So cause of Parkinson disease is the loss of dopaminergic neurons in the substantia nigra pars compacta. You remember here was the pars compacta and here was pars reticulata, right? From one's knowledge of the effects of the nigra striatal pathway on the direct and indirect pathways, it becomes straightforward to see why the loss of this pathway results in the poverty of movement symptomatic of Parkinson's disease, okay? Because the nigra striatal pathway excites the direct pathway and inhibits the indirect pathway, the loss of this input tips the balance in favor of activity in the indirect pathway. Thus, the globus pallidus internal segment neurons are abnormally active, keeping the thalamic neurons inhibited. Without the thalamic input, the motor cortex neurons are not excited, and therefore the motor system is less able to execute the motor plans in response to the patient's volition. Okay. Indirect pathway in Huntington disease. So the symptoms of Huntington disease, guys, or Huntington chorea are in many respects the opposite of the symptom of Parkinson disease, right? As I mentioned before, Huntington disease is characterized by choreiform movements, involuntary continuous movement of the body, especially of the extremities and face. Often these movements resemble pieces of adaptive movements, but they occur involuntary and without behavioral significance. Huntington disease results from the selective loss of striatal neurons in the indirect pathway, right? You can see here, striatum indirect pathway cells die. Thus, the balance between the direct and indirect pathway becomes tipped in favor of the direct pathway. Without the normal inhibitory influence on the thalamus that's provided by the indirect pathway, thalamic neurons can fire randomly and inappropriately, causing the motor cortex to execute motor programs with no control by the patients. Okay, guys, did you understand? And guys, these structures, cerebellum, basal ganglia, and primary motor cortex together, they are only controlling the voluntary movements, initiation of the movement, body balance, okay, but also we have the sensory unit, okay, higher brain functions. So that means that the neurological nervous system, guys, is a quite difficult, right? But my tip for you is to revise anatomy, okay? If you will know anatomy, it will be easier to you to understand how all this pathway works, okay? And tomorrow, guys, please prepare. I will ask you, we will discuss questions, okay? Guys, because in all practice classes, students are just sitting with turned off microphones and not like involving in study process. So please be active tomorrow. Tomorrow we will discuss about the cases, okay? MCQs, I will give you some questions, okay, guys? Right now, I will send all lectures to group leaders. Please, group leaders, forward 2 students. Okay? Сейчас заканчиваю уже. Okay, guys, so bye. Time is over, lecture is over. Bye. Okay, guys, goodbye.
Okay, babe.
Goodbye. You can leave lecture if you don't have any questions. Okay, you can ask questions tomorrow on the practice classes. Okay, guys, bye. See you tomorrow.